The history here is unbelievable, and the number of people that are buried here, famous people from the area, governors and like I said, soldiers, and lots of townspeople that, you know, were instrumental in making Huntsville what it was and what it is.
It is a legacy, so wild and bitter seed, blown across those fertile fields where the roots run deep.
The Pilgrimage Association has said as its primary purpose to restore the monuments, and now we're doing the metal work in Maple Hill Cemetery. And we have some very, very old monuments, and over a period of time, because of wind and rain, weather, these things deteriorate on us, and they become not only less attractive, but they also become, well, they become dangerous, particularly these high monuments. So we're now trying to work on some of the metal work here in the cemetery. That's been a big problem because metal work costs more than doing stone work. We received a grant 2 years ago from the Jane K. Lowe Foundation, and that was a tremendous help for us in beginning to restore some of the old fencing around here. Our whole purpose in both the Angels of Maple Hill and also the Cemetery Stroll is to provide money for the restoration of these monuments.
And Arrington Tunstall passed away. We come out to tell the stories of people who have lived before us, to help tell their stories so that other people can understand their lives and the things that they went through.
And there's a connection with you and the character you're portraying.
Yes, I am related to her. She reared one of my relatives, and we are cousins through the line. She was born in South Carolina, and when she was 3, her mother passed away, and her father sent her to be reared, which was very common during that time period, to be reared by family in Tuscaloosa. It was while she was being in Tuscaloosa that she met Mr. Clay, whom she married, and then they, of course, went to Washington. They lived here for a short time, went to Washington, D.C., and then during the war, she traveled and stayed with family, but she was instrumental in getting Senator Clay out of jail. She met with many leaders. She had a letter writing campaign, and it was because of her and her diligence that he was released from prison, from Fortress Monroe.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is C.C. Clay Jr. This is fun because it's actually some family members of my wife. We've been doing it for about 12 years. So we have a lot of fun with it. C.C. Clay Jr. Was born here in Huntsville in 1812. He was the eldest son of Clement Comer Clay, who was the governor, famous lawyer, senator of the state. C.C. Clay had political aspirations like his father, and ended up in the House of Representatives in Alabama, was a judge here in Madison County, and then became senator of the state of Alabama just before the Civil War. When the Civil War happened, C.C. Clay was one of the senators that actually succeeded from the Union in Washington, D.C., and then became a senator for the Confederacy. Was separated from his wife the entire war. So it's a very interesting story of a pretty controversial guy, because C.C. Clay Jr. ended up in prison for conspiring to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. He wasn't convicted. There was never a trial, and he got out thanks to his wife's works.
If you have any questions, we'd be glad to try to answer them.
The beautiful 1902.
And who are you portraying today?
Today, Mammy Fletcher Coleman. She's also known as Mary. Mammy's her nickname from her family.
And my pa, Sidney Fletcher. Now, before I get to my story, though.
She and her husband, they were on the ship crossing the Atlantic when, of course, the Titanic went down. And so her mother, very concerned, is like, "Oh my gosh, are you on?" And she's like, "No, Mom," writing her a letter. No, she was on another one at the same time, but kind of shows the time period and very much the ongoings that were very significant to the people's lives at that point.
And around 3 o'clock in the morning.
She was a very great lady that her son and grandson were very outstanding citizens here in Huntsville.
And I saw the little headline about the Underground Railroad. Tell me a little bit about her participation in that. Okay,
there were quilts made that had to do with the Underground Railroad. They were hung outside with the signals for the people that were wanting to be free.
The character I'm portraying is Virginia Betts, or Mrs. Edward Chambers Betts.
Tell me why in the world, and you mentioned a moment ago, you've got a new dress. Why would you, what is so important about the stroll that you've got a new dress?
Well, I enjoy doing this, and I was using the dress that I had used for Huntsville's bicentennial from 2005, and it's about time for a new dress for all of us ladies. So yes, I had a new dress made by Michelle Roberts. Well, the character Virginia is, her claim to fame really is her grandson, and her grandson was the person who wrote the early history of Huntsville. We still have copies of that. It was done in the early 1900s, and he wrote the history of Huntsville up till that time.
Since 1987, we've spent over $250,000 on restoring the cemetery, but it has to be continued. We have to continue to go back and check them and make sure they're okay, make sure they're safe, make sure they continue to be clean, make sure there's not moss and stuff growing on them. The people who come to the Stroll are so gracious to donate, and we don't ask for any money, but there are areas where you can donate to help us maintain the cemetery, and that's very important to do that while you're here.
It is a legacy. It's a wild and bitter seed scattered on those fertile fields where the roots run deep.